In this city of impossible steel and impossible wealth, control is the only currency. Elias Vance, calculating, immovable, he looks at a monument of forgotten concrete, the Hawthorne Tower, and sees $1 billion of necessary erasure, a history he intends to bury. But the city has an advocate, Anya Sharma. She sees a masterpiece, a structure worth fighting for, demanding passion where he offers only profit. She is the fire to his ice. Their war was inevitable, a courtroom collision that should have ended with a verdict, but instead delivered a command. They must work together. One room, 90 days. Two people who hated each other for all the right professional reasons, about to discover the one reason they couldn't stay away. Chapter 1. The Collision. The air inside the Vance Tower penthouse office was thin, cold, and quiet, a perfect reflection of the man who occupied it. Elias Vance, at 36, was a titan of finance, a figure sculpted in granite and Italian wool. He possessed the kind of wealth that insulated him from reality, and the kind of gaze, sharp, calculating, and intensely blue, that made anyone under 30 feel like an amateur. His current target was a crumbling monument to post-war architecture, the Hawthorne Tower. It stood defiant amidst a sea of sleek glass and steel, a colossal structure of exposed concrete, beloved by architects and despised by developers. Elias saw only potential, a billion-dollar teardown, replaced by the city's next shimmering mixed-use monolith. "The deal is finalized, Mr. Vance," his chief counsel, Marcus, stated, his voice hushed in the intimidating silence of the office. "The Hawthorne Tower is ours. Demolition permits are being filed next week." Elias didn't smile. He simply nodded, his jaw tight. "Good. Get the press release ready. We start the clock immediately. I want the site cleared before the end of Q3. But the Hawthorne Tower had an advocate, a relentless, infuriating thorn in his side named Anya Sharma. Anya was the antithesis of Elias Vance's world. She was the founder of Preservation Collective, a small, fiercely independent architectural firm dedicated to saving the city's forgotten masterpieces. She moved with a kinetic energy that felt like a vibrant force against the muted gray of the city, her dark hair often escaping its braid, her eyes flashing with passionate conviction. She learned of the Vance acquisition not through official channels, but through a frantic call from a distraught historian. Within hours, Anya had mobilized. The next afternoon, she stood on a makeshift stage outside the Hawthorne, the brutalist concrete façade looming behind her like a protective shield. She addressed a crowd of journalists, city council members, and furious residents. Elias Vance sees a blank check. He sees a liability to be erased. He sees the past as rubble. But this structure, this tower, is a cornerstone of our city's identity. It is a masterpiece of innovation. Vance Endevilment intends to turn it into another anonymous glass box. She locked eyes with the camera, imagining Elias watching, somewhere high above the city in his steel and ice cage. "Mr. Vance, your wealth buys property, but it doesn't buy history. It certainly doesn't buy silence." The footage hit the evening news. Elias, who had cultivated an image of unassailable corporate dominance, saw his victory narrative hijacked by a 30-year-old woman in a slightly rumpled linen jacket. "Cancel the permits," Elias barked into the phone later that night, pacing his minimalist living room overlooking the financial district. "I want a full team dedicated to shutting down her collective. A cease and desist, a lawsuit, whatever it takes to bury her. She wants a fight? I'll give her one she can't afford." The initial conflict wasn't just about a building. It was a fundamental clash of philosophies. Anya fought for the soul of the city. Elias fought for maximum profit and control. She challenged his power in the only way that mattered: publicly, loudly, and with righteous fervor. The first volley was brutal. Vance Development filed an aggressive, high-value slap suit against Preservation Collective, threatening to bankrupt Anya and her small team. Anya refused to buckle. She countered with an emergency injunction, leveraging arcane zoning laws and the building's recent inclusion in a tentative historic register. 2 weeks of legal maneuvering culminated in a tense, packed courtroom. Anya sat at the defense table, feeling the weight of the city's architectural legacy and her entire professional future resting on her shoulders. Then Elias walked in. He was late, which was its own power play. He didn't sit with his legal team. He stood at the back, leaning against the polished wood paneling. His charcoal suit seemed to absorb the room's limited light. He looked less like a litigant and more like a predator staking his territory. Anya felt a visceral, hot spark ignite in her chest, equal parts fury and a reluctant and dangerous awareness of his sheer physical presence. She straightened her spine, forcing herself to focus on the judge. The judge, a formidable woman named Helen Graves, looked weary of the corporate drama. She scanned the hostile room, then fixed her gaze on the two adversaries. This court is tired of the theatrics, the retaliatory lawsuits, and the blatant disregard for the public good, Justice Graves announced, her gavel tapping the wood like a warning shot. Miss Sharma, your injunction holds merit regarding the zoning technicality. Mr. Vance, your acquisition is legal. Elias's lips twitched slightly in a barely perceptible smirk. Anya clenched her fist under the table. Then Justice Graves delivered the verdict that changed everything. The court rules that, given the Hawthorne Tower's current status and its public significance, neither a full demolition nor a full preservation is immediately permissible without a full court-mandated review. Therefore, I am ordering the formation of a mandatory joint development committee. Anya's head snapped up. Elias pushed off the wall, a sudden sharp fissure appearing in his cool demeanor. Justice Graves continued, impervious to their shock. Mr. Vance, as the owner, you will provide the capital and primary resources. Ms. Sharma, you will provide the architectural and preservation expertise. You will jointly produce a viable, respectful, and profitable plan for the Hawthorne Tower within 90 days. And you will work together in the same room, effective immediately. The room dissolved in a collective gasp. Anya met Elias's glare. His eyes were cold, hard ice, promising swift, absolute war. She knew, in that gut-wrenching moment, that she hadn't just saved a building, she had just trapped herself in a small, intensely hot room with the most powerful and undeniably magnetic enemy she had ever known. Chapter 2. Forced Proximity. The first meeting was held 3 days later, not in the Vance Tower, but in a neutral, sterile, windowless conference room rented specifically for the committee. Elias insisted on the neutral ground, determined not to give Anya any visual leverage. Anya arrived precisely on time, bringing rolled-up blueprints, a worn leather satchel, and a steaming travel mug. Elias arrived 5 minutes late, flanked by 2 lawyers and Marcus, carrying nothing but a slim stainless steel briefcase. Ms. Sharma, Elias acknowledged, his voice a low, gravelly monotone that somehow sounded both dismissive and profoundly personal. He didn't offer his hand. Mr. Vance, ready to discuss how you plan to gut this project and my firm from the inside? Anya countered, not flinching from his proximity as he took the chair opposite her at the vast mahogany table. I have no interest in your firm, Ms. Sharma, only in mitigating the financial damage your idealism has caused, Elias said, opening his briefcase. The click of the latches was loud in the small room. Let's start with the hard numbers. Your preservation plan projects a 10% return on investment over 10 years. My preliminary demolition plan projects a 300% return over 3 years. Which of these numbers looks like mitigation to you? Profit is not the only metric for success, Mr. Vance. That's what separates an architect from a shark, Anya shot back. And your demolition plan is moot. If you tear it down, you violate the injunction and the building's new historic status. You'll be tied up in litigation for a decade. Elias leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. The shift in his posture felt like a physical challenge. Is that a threat, Ms. Sharma, or simply wishful thinking? It's a fact, Anya insisted, pushing a detailed structural survey toward him. And the compromise must be renovation, not replacement. The structure is sound. We convert it to high-end adaptive reuse mixed space. A museum-quality gallery floor, boutique hotel, and residential space. We keep the brutalist aesthetic, but modernize the interior for light and function. Elias picked up the survey, his long fingers trailing over the complex blueprints. Anya watched him, mesmerized by the intensity of his concentration. He wasn't just glancing at the documents, he was reading them. Adaptive reuse, Elias scoffed, though his voice was quieter, more thoughtful. Meaning we spend $40 million retrofitting ugly concrete instead of $5 million flattening it. Meaning we create something unique, Mr. Vance, Anya said, her voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. A legacy, not just an investment. The city needs a flagship project that respects its past while moving forward. This could be it. It could be your legacy. That word legacy landed like a stone on glass. Elias's head snapped up, the blueprints forgotten. His eyes were suddenly dangerous, stripping away the professional mask to reveal something harder, colder, and utterly untouchable. Don't lecture me on legacy, Miss Sharma, he clipped, his voice low and tight. Your sentimental attachment to a block of concrete is naive. My legacy is built on results, not romantic ideals. And what results are those, Mr. Vance? Anya challenged, matching his intensity. You own half of Manhattan. You've demolished more history than you've built future. Tell me, what is the real reason you hate this building so much? What does it represent that you want so desperately to bury? Elias stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with a scrape that made the lawyers jump. This meeting is over. Marcus, have the design team review these blueprints. Ms. Sharma, send me your revised financing model by 0900 tomorrow. And if it's not financially viable, I'll find a way to bypass your committee, your injunction, and your entire pathetic defense. He strode out, leaving a vacuum of cold air behind him. Anya stared at the empty doorway, her heart pounding a furious rhythm against her ribs. He was infuriating, dismissive, and utterly terrifying. But she also noticed something critical. He hadn't dismissed her idea entirely. He had only challenged the financing. The stakes were now personal. Anya had to prove her vision wasn't just beautiful, it was bankable. And to do that, she needed to crack the impenetrable shell of Elias Vance. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Façade. For the next 3 weeks, the forced proximity became a pressure cooker. They were confined to their temporary space for mandatory weekly meetings, plus countless late-night emails and shared document portals. Anya worked tirelessly, redesigning her financial model, optimizing every square foot for maximum rental yield without compromising the architectural integrity. Elias, surprisingly, matched her intensity. He tore apart her spreadsheets with surgical precision, finding hidden costs and optimizing tax structures she hadn't even considered. His critiques were brutal, but never wrong. He was a force of nature when focused. One evening, deep into the night, they found themselves alone in the conference room. The lawyers and assistants had long since retreated. The only light came from the single desk lamp illuminating the blueprint-covered table. Anya was running through the numbers on projected residential occupancy. If we market the top 10 floors as private condos with the historic pedigree, we can justify a 30% premium over current market rates in this district. Elias leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair, a rare, slightly disheveled gesture that made him look less like a corporate monument and more like a man exhausted by his own relentless pace. "That's an aggressive projection, Sharma," he murmured, but there was no malice in his voice, only fatigue. "People pay for story, Vance," she said, looking up at him. "They pay for something that feels unique. That's why you buy a vintage watch over a brand new one. It has a narrative. The tower has one." A moment of strange, heavy silence settled between them. The air was thick with unspoken words. Not business words, but words about the intense, frictional energy that had been building between them since the moment they met. "You're passionate," Elias conceded, his eyes holding hers in the warm, focused pool of light. "You're brilliant," Anya returned, surprising herself with the honesty of the compliment. "You found $300,000 of hidden efficiency in my HVAC plan. That's more than Marcus and his team did in 2 days." Elias almost smiled. The movement was fleeting, a quick twitch at the corner of his mouth that vanished immediately, leaving her wondering if she had imagined it. "Efficiency is the only poetry I understand, Sharma," he said, his voice regaining its customary steel. "That's a shame," Anya sighed, gathering her papers, "because you're missing out on the epic poem right outside your window." Before she could leave, the door burst open. Marcus stood there, pale and breathless. "Mr. Vance, we have a problem. A major one. The structural report, the one Anya's team initiated, was leaked to the Times, and it's worse than we thought." The paper hadn't leaked the original minor findings. It had revealed a critical, deep-seated defect in the tower's foundation, a result of decades of neglect and shifting underground water tables. The headline screamed, "Hawthorne Tower, architectural masterpiece, structural time bomb." The stakes rocketed overnight. The city immediately issued a stop work order, freezing all current development plans and mandating an immediate, expensive, and complex shoring operation. The project's viability and Elias's reputation collapsed. Elias stared at the headline projected onto the conference room wall. He didn't explode. He became unnervingly still. "Who leaked it?" he asked, the question delivered with terrifying calm. "We don't know, sir, but the timing is strategic. Another developer, rival group, is now publicly suggesting they can step in, buy the property out from under Vance, and stabilize it with a massive government bailout, claiming Vance Development lacks the expertise." Elias's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a business problem. It was a public challenge to his dominance. "They're trying to sink us, Anya," Elias said, turning to her. For the first time, he didn't use her last name. His voice was laced with a venomous focus that was entirely professional, yet somehow intimately shared. Anya felt a surge of adrenaline, realizing this was the moment of truth. She could walk away. She could let rival group buy the mess, and Hawthorne Tower might still be saved, albeit without her unique vision. But watching the flicker of pure, unadulterated danger in Elias's eyes, she knew she couldn't. This was his moment of vulnerability, and she was the only one in the room who could fight alongside him. "You want to tear the building down, but you won't let anyone else have the pleasure," Anya observed, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "Fine. You need an expert, and you need political leverage. I have both." "And what's your price, Sharma?" he asked, wary. "No price," she said simply. "I want to save the tower. You want to crush your rival. Our goals align, temporarily. We fight the rival group's offer, we stabilize the foundation, my way, then proceed with the adaptive reuse plan, my way. And you fund it without question." Elias stared at her defiance, her intelligence, her sheer nerve. He saw not a sentimental architect, but a formidable, clear-eyed partner. He slowly nodded. Deal. Now, tell me how we shore up the foundation before the rival group's bid goes public. They stayed up all night, bent over blueprints and structural analyses, the intense pressure stripping away their animosity. They argued not as enemies, but as collaborators, their voices low, their hands occasionally brushing as they pointed to a column or a stress point. Anya saw his capacity for intense, brilliant problem solving. Elias saw her ability to remain calm and creative under immense pressure. When dawn broke, flooding the room with cold, gray light, they had a plan. A risky, aggressive, and expensive plan. But as Elias looked at Anya, illuminated by the rising sun, he didn't see the woman who had humiliated him in court. He saw the only person who had ever truly challenged him and survived, and the only person who had ever managed to make him feel like he wasn't entirely alone in the high-stakes game of his life. Chapter 4. The Reveal. The race to stabilize the Hawthorne Tower became a 24-hour operation, driven by Elias's capital and Anya's engineering ingenuity. The shared crucible of crisis melted down the last remnants of their professional antagonism. The sharp, hostile banter was replaced by a rapid-fire, almost intimate shorthand. Vance, the stress load on Pylon 7 is at 95%. We need the carbon fiber mesh now, not in 2 hours. It's on the freight elevator, Sharma. Marcus is running cover on the permit violation. Just secure the beam. Late one Friday, after a grueling 3-day stint in the field, they were back in the conference room. Elias had brought in takeout, expensive gourmet Indian food, an unexpected and oddly tender gesture. Anya laughed when she saw it. A truce offering, or did you just assume I was too exhausted to cook for myself? Neither, Elias admitted, pulling out a chair for her. I just hate inefficiency. Starving people make errors. As they ate, the professional shield between them cracked further. Anya learned that Elias hadn't inherited his wealth. He had built it from a modest background, working 18-hour days for 2 decades. She learned that his ruthlessness was less about greed and more about a pathological fear of losing control. "Why the Hawthorne, Elias?" Anya asked quietly, pushing aside her empty container. The informality of his first name felt natural now. "You don't just buy available, you target, you hunt. This building has history. Your reaction to it isn't detachment, it's personal. You treat it like a wound you want to cauterize." He didn't speak. The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Anya pressed on. When the structural analysis came out, you didn't just worry about the money. You were furious, scared even. It wasn't about the rival group. It was about this building being fundamentally broken. Elias finally lowered his fork, his movements slow and deliberate. He picked up his glass of water, draining it in a single, rough swallow. "My mother worked in the Hawthorne Tower," he finally said, his voice flat and lifeless. Anya waited, her breath caught in her throat. He stared into the distance, seeing a different building, one filled with the fluorescent lights of the past. "When I was 15, the city had a major ice storm. The tower's heating system was failing, a cheap, corner-cutting installation from the 60s. The management refused to fix it properly. My mother had a heart condition she kept secret, so she never complained about the cold. She collapsed at her desk from a coronary event, triggered by the low temperatures in the office." He didn't look at Anya, focusing on a spot on the wall behind her. "The official report called it a natural death. I called it negligence. The building broke her. It was cold, it was brutal, and it didn't care about the people inside it." The pieces clicked into place for Anya. The relentless drive for efficiency, the hatred of the structure, the absolute focus on financial domination. It wasn't greed, it was vengeance. He wanted to tear it down because to him, it was the site of his deepest pain. It was the physical manifestation of the system that failed his mother. I didn't want to replace it with a pretty tower, Anya, Elias confessed, his voice ragged, finally meeting her gaze. I wanted to erase it. I wanted to turn it into dust and salt the earth so no one could ever be hurt by this structure again. It's not a masterpiece, it's a mausoleum. Anya's anger vanished, replaced by a devastating wave of understanding and fierce, protective compassion. This terrifying, powerful man was just a grieving 15-year-old boy, buried under layers of corporate armor. Elias, she began, her voice soft but firm. You don't have to erase the past to heal from it. She reached across the table, her hand resting over his. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and the shock of it seemed to paralyze him. The negligence wasn't the tower, Anya insisted. It was the people who let the systems fail. If you replace it, you forget the lesson. If you fix it, if you make it sound, safe, and beautiful, you're honoring her. You're taking control of the place that hurt her and making it a haven. That's not erasure. That's redemption. Elias looked at her, his eyes wide, startled by the unexpected vulnerability he had revealed and the startling kindness she had shown in response. Her hand, small but warm and steady, was the only thing anchoring him. Chapter 5. The Confession and Climax. The revelation had shattered the enemy dynamic, replacing it with a fragile, volatile intimacy. Elias retreated slightly, ashamed of his exposed emotion, but Anya refused to let him go. She saw the truth now. His ruthlessness was a symptom of unhealed grief. Their collaboration intensified, fueled by unspoken tension and a mutual, reluctant respect. They worked side by side on the shoring plans, deep in the building's sublevels. One particularly stormy evening, they were 20 feet below ground, inspecting the placement of the massive stabilization jacks. The only light came from their helmet lamps and the occasional flash of lightning, illuminating the damp concrete walls. Anya slipped on a patch of wet slurry. She braced for the fall, but a steel-strong hand shot out, wrapping around her arm and pulling her tightly against a solid, unmoving chest. She was pressed against Elias Vance, the scent of him, clean and expensive, mingling with the damp, earthy smell of the concrete. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the sound deafening in the underground silence. "Watch your step, Sharma," he breathed, his voice close to her ear, husky with something that was definitely not professional concern. "I was watching," she managed, tilting her head back to look at him. Their helmet lights crossed, blinding them both momentarily, but she could feel the heat radiating from him, the solid tension in his grip. "Liar," he countered, his fingers tightening on her arm. "You were distracted. You're always distracted when we're in this space." "And what do you think I'm distracted by, Vance?" she challenged, her voice low. The air was charged, thick with the humidity and the proximity. He didn't answer with words. He answered by closing the remaining distance, his mouth finding hers with a sudden, devastating hunger. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was a detonation. It was the release of weeks of tension, the clashing of their strong wills, and the recognition of an equal fire. Anya responded instantly, fiercely, wrapping her arms around his neck, pulling him closer to the rough, unyielding concrete wall. The kiss was desperate, tasting of storm and necessity. It felt like both a victory and a surrender. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the only sound was the distant drumming of rain on the street above. Elias leaned his forehead against hers, his control completely gone. "That was a colossal mistake," he muttered, his eyes shut. It was inevitable, Anya corrected, her own voice shaky. You can't generate this much friction without starting a fire, Elias. He pulled back, running his face over, trying to rebuild the wall. I can't do this, Anya. You're everything I deliberately cut out of my life. Your chaos, your idealism, your feeling. I can't afford that kind of vulnerability. Anya knew this was the moment, the emotional climax where the billionaire retreated behind his defense mechanism. She couldn't let him. You think I'm asking you to become soft, Elias. I'm not. I'm asking you to let me be the strength that supports the concrete when you're dealing with the fault lines. I know your story. I know why you're afraid of broken structures. But I'm an architect. I don't run from a fault line. I find a way to reinforce it. She stepped back, giving him space, but holding his gaze. The rival group is submitting their final bid tomorrow. They want to tear down what we've worked so hard to save. I have the power to block them, indefinitely, with another injunction. But if I do that, the tower remains in limbo, tying up your capital, and it ruins your timeline for expansion. It will be an act of complete professional war. Do it, Elias said with a nod, his eyes fixed on all that was at stake. No, Anya corrected, her voice ringing with sudden clarity. I won't use my professional power to punish your humanity anymore. I trust your commitment to the renovation now. I trust your vision of redemption. The only way we win, the only way we both walk away with everything, the building, your company's reputation, and us, is if you make a choice that proves you're not the man they think you are. Elias stood there, utterly exposed, facing the highest stakes choice of his life, his decades-long dedication to self-sufficiency and control, or the risky, terrifying promise of a shared future. He took a slow, agonizing breath, then reached out, not for the blueprint, but for her hand. His grip was firm, warm, and absolute. Marcus, Elias said into his radio, his voice echoing in the cavernous sublevel, the tone now infused with a new, terrifying authority. Cancel the defensive lawsuit against the rival group. Instead, prepare a public statement. Announce that Vance Development is withdrawing all previous demolition plans. Announce that we are committing $250 million to the full preservation and adaptive reuse of the Hawthorne Tower, designed by the Preservation Collective, as a monument to sustainable, responsible development. He looked at Anya, his eyes burning with a fierce, possessive love. We're not fighting them, Anya. We're changing the narrative. We're building something that can't be bought or bulldozed. We're building our legacy. Together. It was the sacrifice of control, the confession of trust, and the most powerful declaration of love Anya had ever heard. Chapter 6. The Renovation. 3 years later. The Hawthorne Tower stood taller, prouder, and more stunning than anyone had dared to imagine. Its brutalist concrete façade had been cleaned and sealed, its stark lines preserved, but its interior was transformed. Sunlight flooded the central atrium, now a stunning museum-quality gallery space. The top 10 floors, the private condos, were all sold out, commanding the highest prices in the city, thanks to the building's unique architectural story. Anya Sharma stood on the top-floor residential terrace, overlooking the city, her arm laced through Elias Vance's. She was no longer just the head of the Preservation Collective. She was the acclaimed chief architect and co-owner of Vance and Sharma Development, a company focused entirely on responsible, high-profile adaptive reuse projects. Elias was different. He still wore the immaculate suits and commanded immense respect, but the cold shell was gone. He smiled now, a genuine, warm expression that still took Anya's breath away. He had learned that true control wasn't about dominating the external world, but about managing the internal one. The gallery opening tonight is going to be a madhouse, Anya chuckled, sipping champagne as the late afternoon sun painted the city in gold. Unnecessary kind of madness, Elias murmured, kissing the top of her head. The market research shows the public is responding overwhelmingly to the narrative of redemption. You were right, Anya. People pay for a story. And for a foundation that won't break, she teased, running her fingers over his hand. He turned, taking her by the shoulders, his blue eyes intense and serious, though warmed by an unmistakable tenderness. I had one goal when I bought this building: erasure. Now I have 100 goals, and they all involve building a better future here and at home. You taught me the difference between tearing down and building up, darling. Anya smiled, her heart full. I just reinforced the structure that was already there, Elias. He shook his head. No, you tore down the wall I had built around my heart, and you gave me a life that is chaotic, passionate, brilliant, and infinitely better than the quiet, cold one I was planning. He pulled a small, worn piece of paper from his pocket. It was a faded, 30-year-old clipping from a city newsletter, a brief mention of a new secretary starting work at the Hawthorne Tower. His mother. I keep this now, not to remind me of the pain, but to remind me of the reason, Elias said, his voice soft. I didn't replace her mausoleum. I transformed it into a legacy she would have been proud of. He put the clipping away, then looked at Anya, the late sunlight catching the gold band on her ring finger. Now, he said, his famous CEO intensity returning, but aimed entirely at her, I have to go down and greet the mayor, but I want to come back to you. Always. And I want to get that argument we started in the sub-level, the one we started 3 years ago. What do you say, Miss Sharma Vance? Anya reached up, pulling his tie loose with a playful tug. I say you're still brilliant, Vance, and I still love your chaos. They shared a final, lingering kiss on the terrace, surrounded by the revitalized structure that had brought them together, the testament to their battle, their vulnerability, and their complete, undeniable love. The brutalist heart, once cold and scarred, now beat with a warmth and purpose greater than any profit margin.